So part of this morning we mentioned to you was that we were going to provide to you as much information as we could that we thought would be helpful to you and to your organization in this phase of recovery. So we've lined up a number of folks, and so you'll see them here on this sheet. It's being revised by the minute, which is reflective of the situation that we all find ourselves in that people are being taken away to do other things, and so are unable to be here today, and then we've got other people filling in. So this is a slate as I know it at 10:30, and so the Alberta EMA, unfortunately, we're not able to be here. They are otherwise engaged. They do have a couple of very good documents that they have produced, which you probably saw. One that most recently that came out this week, I call it the green document because I never remember the title of it, but many of you have seen it. We'll make sure that that link is on the resource list on the website. It's an exceptionally good document that does go over many of the aspects that you'll be curious about, both on a personal level and as an organization. The second speaker that we have is Matt Baden, and he's actually here in the room. So Matt is a Community Initiatives Manager with Flood Recovery at the Canadian Red Cross. He's in the Calgary area, correct? Yes. He's been there from 2013 to 14. He's been a community engagement coordinator. He's been Action Coalition on Human Trafficking from 11 through 13, provincial coordinator on humanitarian issues with the Red Cross from 08 to 2013, a community planner before that, working with vulnerable youth with the United Way of Calgary and area. So there you go, Matt. Welcome.
Thank you. It's always nice to know that I'm a lot more impressive than I actually am. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. I know that I'm sure a lot of you actually have a lot of questions around what the Red Cross does during disaster and how the Red Cross can support Fort McMurray recover from this disaster. I'd first like to just acknowledge that the recovery of Fort McMurray is really your own. The Red Cross is, of course, full disclosure, has, of course, a lot of money and a lot of responsibility to administer that money wisely. But I would like to say is that really the Red Cross is there to support the recovery, relief, and reentry initiatives that you will all be a part of. Not to direct, not to take over, not to will really take over the entire response. We're there to support individuals and agencies throughout this process. And like I was introduced, my regular title is actually with the 2013 floods. I've been doing recovery work for the last 3 years in southern Alberta. Of course, I have some experience and some knowledge from that area, but I will again say is that that experience is not to dictate what the recovery for your community is going to look like. We're there to and support. Sorry. The Red Cross has a long history of working with communities in Alberta with major disasters, from the Slave Lake fires in 2011, the southern Alberta flooding that affected a lot of communities in the southern half of the province in 2013 and continues to this day, and now with this current disaster. We work as an auxiliary to government, which means that we work quite closely with our colleagues with the Alberta Emergency Management Agency, with the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo and other infected municipalities, our First Nations communities as well, and of course with community organizations. I'm happy to say that the response to the 2013 floods, we were actually able to fund 85 separate initiatives, or 85 separate initiatives within different communities across southern Alberta. So we do have a long history of actually supporting community-led and community-driven recovery work in impacted communities. And while I can't necessarily speak to exactly what that's going to look like for the Fort McMurray recovery, what I can say is that that number is going to be substantial, and we will have an announcement regarding community investments and our community granting program coming out imminently. Our recovery programming is aimed at trying to holistically address issues in the community, and will focus on supports for reentry, supports for self-recovery, which will include our case management and outreach programs, shelter and lodging, safety and well-being supports, as well as supports to livelihoods and supports to small business. The additional pillar that I think you're probably all most interested in is, of course, the community granting, which, like I mentioned, we will have an announcement coming, I believe, next week. This programming will focus on 4 pillars, which will include community strengthening projects, building back better, building community capacity for future disasters, and reconnecting with natural environment. I know that the road to recovery is not an easy one, as I think Matt Sawatsky did to really reflect on, but I want to just reiterate that the Red Cross is going to be here to support for the long term. We have a lot of experience that we can certainly share with your organizations, but I think most importantly for me, and why it keeps me doing this work, is really learning from all of you and the recovery process for your community. So I know that we probably don't have a ton of time for questions, and kind of directed to steer away, but is there any burning questions right now that I can maybe answer for the room?
Will you actually be up on site?
Yes, so actually we have a team working with the regional, the regional operations center presently, and we'll be setting up a team this weekend actually to begin with the reentry work with the community. Okay.
As with every disaster, there's always rumors going around about where the money goes that the Red Cross collects. And so I know there has been reassurance from Red Cross before, but can you just repeat, all the money, more than 100 million plus matches, does that all go to Wood Buffalo or does it go elsewhere?
It will stay in impacted communities, absolutely. So that money will go, all of it will go to the impacted communities within the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo. Yeah.
Is there, just kind of touching on that, is there a timeline that happens within, or how does that get determined?
Sorry, can you?
Is there a timeline? So the money, the dollars that have been donated,
Right.
It's a lot of money, right? And we know that this is all going to happen in phases. So is there a timeline? Does the money get distributed within 5, 7 years? Like, is there a number?
No, that's a really good question. So we know that recovery takes a long time, and so what we will try and emphasize is a longer term recovery program. There'll be immediate funds that will be released for the relief stage that we're spending currently, and then for the transitional phase going for the re-entry, and then longer term recovery supports that will be there for years to come. So the idea is that we design a recovery program in response to community needs that we can work long term with the community. Does that make sense?
It does. Can you define long-term?
Long term is basically until every dollar is spent. So as needs maybe diminish, we look to maybe longer term supports around community resilience initiatives, towards disaster risk reduction initiatives, and things along those lines.
I wanted to know that the nonprofit sector, is there a way that we can access funds from Red Cross?
Absolutely. So the community granting program will have an application package ready for next week, and then there'll be within a formal announcement, which will have all of the details of how to access the money from Red Cross. And then we hope to have actually, one of the unique things we're going to try and do for this response is actually have a web page online where all these tools can be accessed, launched by early July. Perfect.
You can actually provide a list updated of what all the initiatives you are supporting somewhere online?
For this current.
Being spent.
Yes. Sorry. We will have reporting that will be released to the community. I can't speak to the frequency of that, but there will be a list and things like that about how we're actually addressing community needs and what kinds of projects we're engaged in for within, I would imagine, the next couple of months. Great. Oh, sir.
I know the United Way supports a lot of community initiatives within the Fort McMurray region and the municipality. Will this impact any of the funds that would normally go from the Fort McMurray United Way? This is just extra support, right?
Essentially, yes. So this will go to projects that are geared towards community recovery. So like I mentioned before, so the 4 pillars will be community strengthening projects, building back better, building community capacity for future disasters, and then reconnecting with natural environments. And with the release of the granting package next week, is that we'll have like more defined parameters of what each of those pillars actually mean.
But it won't take away from the money that they already currently
No,
get.
and what we would hope to do is actually collaborate with all of you as well as funders in the community to address specific community or specific recovery needs to make sure that we're using disaster dollars for disaster related projects, and then the ongoing funding that is in the community is used for ongoing programs and projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you give pockets or pools of money to United Way and let them do what it is that they do with their familiarity in the community?
Right, so we have to ensure, what I can speak to is what I can't say is how exactly this is all going to work out at this very moment. As I'm sure you can imagine, things are fairly fluid. But what I can say is that we do need to ensure that the dollars that are given out have to go to disaster recovery, right? The intention of what they were raised for.
Right, I
Yeah.
understand that, but would you trust that United Way, with their history of being stewards of donated dollars, would be able to do that? Or it all has to go through Red Cross?
And again, why I can't speak to that exactly right now is that I don't think anything is off the table at this point. What we just need to ensure is that whatever project is undertaken, it is going to a recovery need in the community. Yeah.
Actually, one more question about the needs assessment that was done, the online, the one that Red Cross did?
The registration portal or the.
Well, I think there was, I believe there was an email that also came out.
Oh yes, yeah.
Is that closed now? Is it done? Is it ongoing?
That actually I don't have information on, but I can certainly find out for you, and I might be able to get you an answer by the end of the day.
Yeah, there would be some really good information there.
No, absolutely, and no, I understand. That once we get the data collected, we can certainly see how we can share that with community members so that they can plan the recovery.
I was at another meeting yesterday where a question of the needs assessment came up, and it became clear in the conversation that the needs assessment from Red Cross was done at the individual level. So it's me, a citizen person, my needs in this situation. It was not intended to be an organizational needs assessment. So part of my wondering is there a role to do an organizational a parallel organizational needs assessment, and might that be an opportunity to work together but access some recovery?
I would say absolutely. Again, some of the work that Red Cross was able to work with during the 2013 floods is actually working or funding initiatives like EPIC, so that we can get a sense of actually what is going on in the nonprofit community. So I'd say we have a history of that, and while I can't speak to exactly what that might look like in the next few months, but certainly there is a precedence for it.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to try to keep our time here because we have a lot of speakers here. Matt's going to be here if you have any other questions for him. So thanks very much, Matt, for bringing that information forward to us. And again, he mentioned that information would be coming out next week, so we'll hear more over the next coming week. So you see that next on our list is Alberta Health Services, and as you found it earlier, there isn't anybody, I don't think, in the room unless somebody's come in. What we have received is a resource inventory of mental health supports for Albertans impacted by wildfires. So we'll distribute these to all the tables. It is a beginning, I understand, of a list of resources that are available right now. The other thing I can mention is that there was a new document that got issued recently. And again, it is with Alberta Health Services, and it's titled Albertans Impacted by Wildfires. And if you haven't seen that, that did come out recently as well. We'll post that on our websites as well. It's actually a very good document. It does talk a little bit about some of the stuff that Matt was talking about, some of the psychosocial pieces, as well as some of those phases and so on. So take a look at that information, and we'll make sure that this gets circulated to you as well. The region and municipality as well. We had hoped to have had somebody here today Unfortunately, they're a little bit busy, and they weren't able to have anybody attend here today. So we're going to move into the next topic area.
So, yeah, I'm Cheryl Cooper with the RWB Community
Glad to meet
Services. Yeah, and I do have a little piece of a portfolio that I've been working with, and that was with Fauna and the volunteer management side. Can't stress enough to keep in touch on that website there, because there's that 36-page reentry document that has a lot of valuable information in there for sure. We're working on a recovery interagency committee as well. So some of the agencies around this table have been privy to our very first initial meeting. But that recovery interagency committee will likely become the long-term entity that stays in existence in the community for as long as it takes to recover. And what else was there? From that recovery interagency committee, we've been speaking about an emotional well-being subcommittee as being a subcommittee of that interagency committee. But as you know, this is all new to everybody, this experience, so it's just going to take time, staying connected, and sharing as much information as possible throughout the community about what's going on. So that's my little piece. Hi, everybody. Any questions? Be kind. Thanks.
So the next piece we have, we had Reegan McCullough had originally been planning to be with us today and is not available. We've just learned it, but Brenda Gartner's in the room. Brandy, there she is. She's the Aboriginal Community Relations Director with OSCA, and is going to share a little bit around OSCA's role in this whole piece. So Brandy.
Don't we love finding out the minute that you get here that you're speaking in front of everybody? So Reegan sends his regrets. He is in meetings back to back right now, so he really wanted to try to be here, but I believe he got home at 3 a.m. last night and is up going at 6 a.m. this morning again. So again, I'm Brandy Gartner, and I am from Fort McMurray. So I know quite a few of you guys around this table, so that's really neat. So I'm not sure if everybody knows what OSCA is. It's the Oil Sands Community Alliance. So it's an industry association of all the oil sands producers or those that participate on OSCA. So a lot of the work we do is issues related, and so we have 4 key areas that we work in, being in the socioeconomic sphere. At this moment right now, we are quickly reevaluating how we're going to be working, and one of the biggest roles that we've now learned that we're doing is in coordination. So right now we're working quite closely with the REOC and with the POC and with our industry members and also our social profits. So some of the areas that I've been working in closely is the first piece that was the medical response. So we have an industry health task group that meets regularly, and immediately we mobilize that group to find out how industry can support the medical emergency response during this time. So we're working quite closely with Alberta Health Services to figure out some of the pieces, such as medical removals and some of the other pieces, including figuring out how the urgent care center is working and how industry can support and not overwhelm, but also be supported, because as soon as the community became safer, industry became impacted quite closely. So we are working very well together with Alberta Health Services and the Northern Lights Center. Some of the other pieces around that is with mental health. We do have a lot of work and concern for our employees, which is our community, as we all know. So our industry, our companies are working quite closely with Alberta Health and Mental Health Services to make sure we have the supports needed for our staff, because they are impacted and then their families are also impacted. Another big area and close to my heart right now is with our Aboriginal and rural communities. during emergency times, a lot of the information or a lot of requests come out to industry for support. So one of our coordinating roles is to collect the responses, identify who the best responders are for it, and then get that information right back out so that there's not confusion amongst our rural communities and amongst our industry communities. And then finally, and I'm not going to speak very closely on it, is our funder circle, because Kim will be coming up and speaking quite closely to that, so I won't, she knows much more about that than I do. So right now, I just want to give the message that there are a lot of moving parts, and you guys know that. And the term fluid seems to be the one that's bubbling to the surface as the one that's that and overwhelming. Those two words seem to be coming at me very regularly. But we are trying our best to take on some of those moving parts to help with the community planning, both in the emergency response time and also into the future. We are looking long-term as industry, and we are looking to make sure that we have what we need to build this resilient communities. And part of that is working with the social profits and all of the other organizations and agencies. So I want to try to help you guys have a piece of you rest assured that there are some people that are working on that piece, and we're depending on you guys for taking on your piece, and we just need to make sure that our networks are working well together. So I thank you all for inviting us here. I wish Reegan was here to answer some questions. I will do my best to answer some questions if you guys have it, but I fear that often it'll be, I'll get back to you on that. But I will get back to you on that. That is one of the areas that I am skilled at doing. So if anybody has any questions, have at her.
Okay, so we've let Brandy off easy, just as she was hoping we might, but she will be around for a little bit more. So if you do have any questions, she's going to leave her email and cell phone number with us. The important piece from what she has said that there's need to make connections. And so I think that's the takeaway from her comments, is that there's a need to join up the work that's being done collectively. So thanks again to Brandy. So next we have Nick Noik. He's the general manager at Community Futures Wood Buffalo. He's an engaged community leader committed to improving the quality of life for Northern Albertans by liaising and partnering with community groups, government agencies, and local businesses to stimulate economic development in Wood Buffalo. So I turn it over to Nick.
Good morning. It's awesome to see so many groups working together, and I think collaboration is absolutely the key that is going to ensure the success of all of our futures in Fort McMurray. So I represent Community Futures and the Business Support Network, and unofficially sort of representing the Chamber of Commerce. Alexis and I both work at the same office under the Business Innovation Center. I'm going to start with a really good news story. I've been back and forth to Fort Mac since day 3, helping small businesses that are currently working there to do the cleanup of some local Fort McMurray businesses. And day 3, you could tell there was a forest fire. But from the damage perspective, only in those really affected neighborhoods. I was back yesterday again, and the grass is greener. Going down 63, going down the hill, the grass is greener than it's ever been. All the burnt areas where the grass was is starting to regrow now. And, going into Fort McMurray, you have a good sense of this is still home, nothing's changed, and the grass is green. And unfortunately, you go into those affected areas and realize that, yes, there's some devastation that's happened, but on a bigger good news story, everything looks like it's starting to come back and Mother Nature is doing its job. So I know all of us are excited to go back, and so am I. So I'm here today representing the small business community. Us, Chamber of Commerce, Construction Association, Travel and Tourism, the list goes on and on, have put together a business task force with Keanu. I mean, the stakeholder list goes on and on, so sorry if I forgot anybody. We will be putting together a triage center where small businesses can come in and start the process to figure out insurance, finance, HR and payroll, talk to a lawyer, talk to an accountant, and get some information to figure out how they're going to develop their disaster recovery plan, their strategic plan going forward. We're going to have space available for them to use, to make calls out of, like a co-working space. And under the Business Innovation Center, I mean, we've always been there for the small businesses that need space or need additional support or information. We're really excited about this program. We know that without the small businesses, Fort McMurray can't flourish, and we know those small businesses are very important. The big box stores will survive on their own from big dollars from corporate, but the small businesses are really the heart of Fort McMurray, and we want to make sure that they flourish and they come out of this on top. Now, we know they won't all survive, but we want to do our best to make sure that we can help each and every one of them in any way possible. So we're going through that process now. We've put out a survey. We've been contacting all the businesses that have contacted us via the survey, trying to find out, A, are they going back? B, what kind of resources do they need at the moment? And organizations like ATB, BDC, us are helping finance and build the bridge financing to make sure these companies are able to make their payroll, to meet their needs, and continue operations as necessary. So we're really excited, and hope that you'll pass that information off to everyone, that the business community is working hard for the business community to make sure that they can all come back. Any questions? Nope.
Actually, so do you have any indication, I know you guys are just starting this, but in terms of businesses that are returning or not returning, is there a percentage that you can speak to at this point?
I think that they all want to return. I think it's more right now they have to get in and figure out their personal situation and their business situation first. If they figure out that their business is viable and they can support it at the moment, they'll stay and they'll pick up the pieces to both their lives and their businesses. But I think on day one of reentry, those business owners are then going to think about, okay, can my business survive? Where is my personal life at the moment? Is my house gone? And so we're getting a sense that all the businesses want to go back. Once they go back, they'll see what pieces are left of their business and decide whether they can go forward or not. Now, we do know some of those business owners will be returning to get some paperwork to get anything else that they need and going back down south again. So at that time, the business owners will have to make a decision. Jeanette?
Running around the funding for business, I know that for some residents, if they didn't have appropriate insurance or even tenants insurance, that the government, and maybe even the Red Cross, I can say, will be supporting some of those individuals to kind of get back on their feet. Is there some sort of funding that is available for businesses that maybe didn't have appropriate loss of income insurance and those kind of things? Because I understand, it's all good to provide loans for bridging and microloans and those kind of things, but sometimes you just need that cash injection. And will there be, or is there a strategy that Community Futures is engaging funders for, or government to help with that?
So we're waiting for the plan to be announced. There's a group, and it's not public yet, but there is a group that will be announcing some, whether it be grants or funding available for those businesses. So that will be coming down the pipe. What Community Futures will be doing then is assessing the gaps that funding has and be able to go ahead and fill those gaps with very, very low interest loans. So there is an announcement going to be made shortly. I can't give any time frame, but it will be coming. So there is hope for some we'll call it grants or some funds available for those businesses. Cheryl.
I'm taking my hat off here, okay? The municipal hat's on the table. Okay.
Safe environment, it is a church sanctuary. So, Nick, on social media, I've noticed a lot of small businesses posting things like there's no contracts for us to work in the municipality. Like whether that's, backhoeing and cleaning up or whatever that is. Do you have a strategy in place to engage some contracts for our home businesses to be able to survive?
So first part of that is going to be an opinion. The second part will be a little bit more about what groups are doing. So my opinion is, because the government of Alberta has been the one that's been, at the reins at the moment, they're just engaging the contractors that they're familiar with to help. Once it's turned back over to the RMB, I believe that the shop local and make sure that we keep it local will come into play. They just haven't been at the helm to make those decisions. Now, some of you might have seen the Construction Association and the Chamber of Commerce have both been to ministers, have both written to ministers to make sure that they consider using local. I think that one major hurdle is that we're going to have to get over is the insurance companies. And the insurance companies have their preferred contractors nationally, so they send them in. And I think it's going to be those two groups, like the Construction Association and Chamber of Commerce, who are able to speak to those insurance companies and get them at the table to talk as well, to speak as well, because we're a different type of community. We're not. Slave Lake is quite closer to Edmonton, so you had those Edmonton contractors in the capacity from Edmonton to be able to go to Slave Lake and do a lot of the rebuild. And High River, you had the support from Calgary and all the contractors from Calgary because there was a lot of capacity. So we're a very remote community, and we know that we need to be able to work internally with what we have and support those businesses that have otherwise lost quite a bit of revenue and don't know when they're be able to pick up those pieces. So Construction Association, Chamber of Commerce have both been busy trying to make sure that those local contractors are used.
Hi, I'm with City of Edmonton, so I've been working at the reception center and at the university reception centers. And a question that's come up from a number of the evacuees is if they have employment and are needing to return for employment but don't have housing or are not sure about their housing, are there any other arrangements for housing?
So I know that they've looked into the possibility of bringing in extra camps as well, and giving priority to the people who did not have insurance or the people that have lost their house. I do know that the Wood Buffalo Housing is going through and creating a plan for accommodations at the moment for those people to get them into those housing units that are undamaged. Jeanette?
What's that Ford Ridge housing camp thing? What is that for? Is that for firefighters or?
By the
The Quarry Ridge?
Oh.
Right, the old golf
Yeah.
course? There's all those trailers there. What are they for? Who are they for?
Not sure. I just saw them for the first time yesterday as I drove out of Fort McMurray. Looks like, I'm not sure if they're even connected or it's just a lay-down yard at the moment. I can't give you an answer to who will be staying in those trailers, but hopefully. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if those trailers are living in Quarry Ridge or they'll be moved somewhere else. If it's a temporary laydown yard. Can't tell you if it's for industry or it's for the city. Awesome. If anyone has any questions, my name is on the email list as well, and please feel free to reach out to me, and I can answer those business questions as best as I can. So thank you.
Okay, so we have a few more people to hear from. Next up, we're going to have Dr. Brenda Sautner. Brenda's with the Fort McMurray Public School District. Got that right. And she's actually been in the community for about 8 years and has connected the work of public schools to a number of supports within community. So we thought it was important to have her come here today to talk about what that might look like on the go forward. Brenda.
Good morning. That's what we say in school. Good morning. Okay, that's making me feel more at home. Thank you very much. You know you're on the road to recovery when your clothes start to match. And well done today. I know that I did well with my friend's sweater and my mother's skirt, so I thank them for today because it's important to be here. If there's a united way, this is the united way to do it. So thank you for the invitation and opportunity to be here. We have 25 public schools in Fort McMurray, 3 school districts, and the day after, we've already started talking with the Teachers Association, with the CUPE members, with the Government of Alberta, Alberta Education, and Alberta Health Services. The public schools, and on that day, on May 3rd, we safely evacuated 5,600 children and 500 staff members. My day started walking into Greeley Road at 1 o'clock. I saw that fire, got the call from Beacon Hill principal. I said, get out. Walked into Greeley Road and said, get the kids out, call the parents, get the buses. We evacuated Greeley, we evacuated the Fort McMurray Islamic School. We were left with 45 kids on a bus, 17 staff members. We got them to go south because that was a safe road. I ended up at the airport, and I can say that from then we safely evacuated Diane Shannon from the United Way. So, and had the rest of the evening and all night. So thank you for that time together, because at that time it was still fairly surreal. Since then, we know that the public schools in Fort McMurray are physically safe. We did not lose a school. There was minor damage that's all being assessed right now. However, our staff are not so psychologically safe. And we have to acknowledge that we've all been impacted by trauma, particularly the Southside schools that went to evacuation. I saw children break down in front of the school. I saw families break down. The Northside schools went to shelter in place. And so all the kids were able to get picked up. We also had kids who were not unable to be reunited with family just because of the way the evacuation occurred north-south. We had 2 principals hold students for up to 4 days. We had 1 special ed teacher with a severely autistic nonverbal teenager for 4 days. We did what we needed to do. But however, we also have suffered some additional losses. We lost a student on 881. That student came from Beacon Hill and was in Composite High School. We lost a mother in Fort Saskatchewan whose children go to the public school. 1 is Beacon Hill. We lost a father in Tofield whose son is still in the hospital recovering, and that boy goes to Dr. Clark's school. And 2 days ago there was a funeral for a long-standing staff member at Beacon Hill that the children had grown up with, and she was lost to cancer. So the additional losses in particular to the community, we will deal with. The trauma that is impacting is magnitude, it's magnified because of those. But I do agree with the Matt when you said we are YMM strong, we will recover. Our schools will open in August. They will be cleaner than they ever were before, but we will be ready for 10,000 students and 1,000 staff members in the public schools in our region. And if we look at it, we've got to look at what it is that we can do. The public schools have 6 hours a day for 180 days to get working with our students to make a difference. And fortunately, our district's already on Gmail, so thanks for the ability to work with our emails. I did prepare a handout on the table. There's a colored handout. I am fortunate enough to have my executive assistant with me. We're sharing about 2 feet of office space, which is good because we're getting lots done. But I want to refer you to this because one of the things that we needed, because of lots of questions, is what does it look like? And I'm big on visuals. Give me the visual as to what it looks like. Thanks, there's extras there. I don't know if there's enough, but that's okay, we can send them out. What's really critical from the short term is looking at addressing the traumatic stress in schools from staff and students. We've got the ability to impact the children from age 3 to age 19. We have the ability to impact 1,000 staff members who will work with those students who are also impacted in different ways. So how do we do that? We focus on the health promotion model. So we ran this by Alberta Health, we ran it by Alberta Education, and yesterday we had a meeting with our school leaders and said, does this make sense? Because it's building on what we already have. What's key is we focus on the universal strategies. We've got to focus on where we want to be 3 years from now. We want a healthy, resilient, positively developed youth who are going to be our future leaders in Fort McMurray. So we are going to assume that kids are going to come back, and some of these kids are going to be doing well, and they're ready to focus back on what our mandate is, which is teaching and learning and achievement and getting kids through school. And that's a general support. So we need to have our staff, our classroom teachers and our educational assistants who work in classrooms to understand what the stress is, and it's called trauma-informed practices. understanding the trauma. What does it look like in kids? And not only what does it look like from a developmental perspective, from the little ones to the older ones, what do we do about it? And how can I make a difference in my classroom? Because teachers do that anyway. So we are looking at providing the teachers the general awareness and understanding. We're also going to focus on problem solving, positive youth development, resiliency, and more importantly, focus on health and wellness so our kids can enjoy life as it is and what it will become. We then know that there are going to be some children who are going to continue to experience the stressors and or the triggers. One of the things we talked about is, do we have fire drills next year, or can we please have a year off? Because I think we've done really well with getting the kids out of school. But in the literature and the research that we have been immersed in, the recommendation is continue to have fire drills, but up the ante. The kids now will take them seriously, that we can do them in such a way. So those are some of the things that we're reconciling in the general everyday business of schools. And the other day, we've got temporary offices, Fort McMurray Public School District, at Alberta Education. And we were at a meeting that some of you were at. Thank goodness we weren't there at the office, because they had an unexpected fire drill. And some of our staff who are working at Alberta Ed on the 12th floor had to walk down 12 flights and walk back up 12 flights. And some of them walked back up and the color were drained from their face. And the key that we understand now from the traumatic stress is no surprises. If you're going to have a fire drill, please tell. Let's practice it. Let's talk about it. So these are things that we've learned since May the 3rd. So we will then need to provide some targeted intervention. We're fortunate in our schools to have school counselors. So we will be working with our school counselors. They will get trained. Psychological first aid, skills for psychosocial recovery are two of our top ones. That training will come because when these triggers start to come or the symptoms start to present themselves, they're going to be referred to a counselor. We got to make sure the counselors are there. We're a couple of short counselors in some schools, but that's an area of need because we can intervene early. And then we know from there are going to be some kids who need more. This is where we need the mental health therapy and the mental health support and or a very clear referral pathway to a community agency. So if you go to the next visual, which is the circles, the next level is ensuring that our schools are trauma sensitive, that we understand what trauma is, not only in ourselves, but what it is that we're doing with kids and the different ages. So we are going to be working with a district model. Apparently a district model does not exist. One of the things that has surprised me, even though there's the experience and the learnings from Slave Lake, which we have reviewed the literature, we've talked to the staff in the schools, we have talked and reviewed the literature on the flood and the trauma that went with that. There is no toolkit for schools. There is no toolkit to re-enter, to prepare staff to work with the kids. And so I said, it's time for a toolkit. Can we please get a toolkit together? There are experts in the community, so we're going to create a District 1. What does the principal do? What does the counselor do? What does the staff do? And what other support do we need, particularly from mental health therapists? And then the schools and the school leaders, they need to be, we're going to be working with them. The date we've already set for our district, and the Catholics is working on it as well, is August 23rd. We will be working with our principals to prepare them to meet with their staff and for their staff to prepare them to meet with their kids on that first day of school. And because there is no toolkit, we have to figure this out. And we committed, we're going to do it. So each school will have a plan. And each school we're calling a trauma-sensitive school district because in the review of the literature and looking at the experts in the community, and I will have another meeting with the Calgary Board of Education with their trauma specialists. The districts met with them last week. We are going again on Monday to have an afternoon because the trauma specialists there, they are trained in trauma-sensitive schools, which is also similar but conceptually different than trauma-informed practices, which is more of the general awareness. And through there, we've got some training to do, and we will be bringing this training to Fort McMurray. And that training will be open to those of you and your agencies that work with our schools, because we all need to be trained in the same thing in the same way. The public schools do that anyway. So with that, we hope that there's some funding available to be able to bring this training, because the other thing that's needed is a realization with the funding that's needed is, one, we already work well with our agencies. We work incredibly well with United Way, with Alberta Health Services, with Canadian Mental Health Association of Wood Buffalo, Personal Support Network, Borealis Counseling, I have to remember that, and SOS. We do have working relationships. And the issue we have is, I see it, where do we see ourselves 3 years from now? Because we need that short-term focus when those schools open and those kids feel safe in a school, our schools are welcoming, we're inclusive, and there's somebody there to help those kids when it's needed. But the mandate, talking about sticking to your mandate, our mandate is teaching and learning. We don't have a mandate for mental health, and school-based mental health is not a funded mandate in Alberta. And so how do we access some of those supports for the respective school districts to be able to integrate it with the support system that's already in place? We have a good foundation in the public schools for mental health. We've been working on it for the past 5 years. If you've heard removing barriers to mental health, that's the Fort McMurray public one. That is where we've been working with agencies to remove barriers, the systems barriers to getting kids the support that they need. And through your support, for the last few years with the agencies we've worked with, we have that support, we have those resources, but now we are overwhelmed with the needs of the kids and the staff. So I say let's focus on 3 years to make YMM Public Schools strong, because we're working with our future leaders. We need to grow up our little ones to be the leaders to take over, and we need this toolkit. We want to focus on the mental health and wellness. We want to be able to intervene early on the onset of some symptoms of stress and trauma, and we want to be able to provide therapy to students as fast as we can get it to them. And so with those clear pathways and focusing on the positive, healthy development, focusing on increasing the protective factors of the children and youth in our community, I'm confident we can do that. We are looking at who are the experts to bring to town, because if there's one thing I truly appreciate being in Fort McMurray, when we do things good. And when we pull together, we make an incredible difference. And I really am really respectful of the collective impact and the thinking that goes with that, because we can marry mandates and braid resources, and we can make a huge difference. Some of the expertise and resources we are looking for, and I've got a team looking at them right now, is from the Boston Trauma Center. The research that goes with that has been, bar none, the best in terms of trauma-sensitive organizations. So it's not just the schools. What works in our schools should work in any organization in terms of staff. So again, that would be where we are. I give an example on the last page of what a trauma-sensitive classroom looks like. That's an illustrative example. I think that we would like to, I know, and have made the commitment on behalf of the public schools to be the first ever school district that's trauma-sensitive, and we will commit to document, share our resources, our strategies, and our learning, and if there's ever another disaster in Alberta, there will be a toolkit for the schools, and that is one area with which we hope that there would be some support for. So thank you for the opportunity to address this, and if there's one other thing that I think that we need in Fort McMurray, and we think that every student can play a part. Every year we get little trees, Arbor Day trees. Our kids can plant a tree, our staff can plant a tree. So if you've got about 25,000 trees, we'll get them planted for you. Any questions? Does it make sense? Is there ways that, yeah. Laura?
I think it's exciting to hear you how much work we've done and how organized you are and prepared for next year. I'm just wondering, and you're able to ask those questions, do you know if the Cathy board is on the same page as you guys are?
Who?
The Cathy school board.
Yeah, Monica Mankowski has been at the table. She has been at the meetings right now, and she's had to go to Montreal for her son's graduation.
So is
yeah.
it the same across both school boards then?
Yeah, we hope. Yeah, they are very much part of the meetings. Yeah.
I'm just gonna use this opportunity more as a mom to ask you a question, seeing you're here. When the school ended, so my son goes into grade 12 next year, and so with school ending basically May 3rd, there was a significant amount of the curriculum in a bunch of different classes to still be covered. So peers of his, some have gone registered in schools in other places, some are doing distance learning, some are just taking the mark that they had, which then come the start of the school year leaves a class of people at very, very different levels. And I know the beginning of the class is always review, but this will be a difficult and challenging situation. What plans are in place academically to make sure these kids are ready to write their government exams? Or all kids, but I'm worried about mine who writes government exams for grade 12 next year.
Good question. We hope that we're back to normal next year and kids will be writing their exams. This year was an exemption for obvious reasons. I can speak on behalf of Fort McMurray Public School District, and all of those questions we've looked at answering them. There's Q&A on our website at FMPSD. So because of the different nature, we know that 4,400 of the students out of Fort McMurray have registered in another public school or another school in Alberta. We also have families who have registered their students across Canada. We don't have access to that database. We said that by May or so, there was only about 2 months left. Technically, about 80% of the curriculum, the program of study should have been covered anyway. So it should have been. There isn't a scope and sequence by this date. You have to teach this unit in Alberta, although there is a standard program of study for every course offered in an Alberta school. So we're doing the best we can. Teachers are very adept at diverse learners' needs, different needs. I don't think they're used to dealing with the different learning abilities and different levels. So we will continue to work with them to see where the students are. It wasn't really the students whose marks were good. The emails I got, well, I wasn't passing that class, so do I have to have that mark? And I said, well, it's a good question. So we have provided options. And so whatever option is best at this particular time. We do have interventions in our schools, reading and math interventions, and we will be working to see what other additional academic interventions are there. I do encourage you, if you have students or children who you want to continue with, particularly with the high school courses, because of the credits earned go to post-secondary, is to really check out the Alberta Distance Learning Centre, adlc.ca. They have been absolutely fantastic. They've waived course fees. They have a 6th floor of Alberta Education downtown. Kids can go in there. Teachers can go in there. They are monitoring phone lines and provided extra supports for online tutoring as well as call-in. So they've really stepped it up, and it's been really we're honored that they have done that for us. We can't answer in each individual case, but we have been responding to individual student emails and staff emails and parent emails as best we can with the context that you're in. Okay. Thanks.
Hello, Brenda, thank you for your information. I work with the YMCA, and we have partnerships with you around early learning care and school care, and we are anticipating those partnerships will continue to build.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the trauma-informed teaching and the training possibilities, and wondering how we might take advantage of your offering to do some collaborative training, certainly initially, but perhaps in some more ongoing way.
Yeah. Good question. One is we're figuring out who are the best to bring up the training in a way that fits the context. So we do, I think, have a very good network in Fort McMurray with community agencies. I think that if there is a list, as in the list that was provided today, we will commit to announcing as much advanced time as possible who's coming in on what day, so that, and where. Like right now, I know that 2 days will be in August. I'm just confirming what particular days for skills for psychosocial recovery. because that's an area with which we were planning on doing the training anyway, but that is specific to school counselors, mental health therapists, family school liaisons, and those who are in providing more of the therapy supports. It's really not the training for your average parent or teacher in particular. So if the trauma-informed practices is something that is a need, I think that we will have further conversations and ensuring that there's an open invitation at no cost for it. Okay.
Yes, I understand you mentioned you have 25 public schools in Fort McMurray. Maybe I'm looking for some hope there. Do you have, all those schools are full capacity?
Oh, okay. So,
I'm from Baden. We have one French school in Fort McMurray.
Yes.
But I understand that we won't be able to access that school.
correct. There are discussions with Henri Lemieux and the École Boreale in terms of relocating the staff and the students in another public school facility. I can't speak to those. Those discussions are ongoing, and they're in collaboration with the infrastructure department, with Alberta Ed and Government of Alberta. But yes, you are included in our account and in our discussions, particularly at Alberta Education. So what location would the school be? I can't tell you right now. That's being left with Alan Kalal, who is responsible for facilities, in discussion with both superintendents, or actually 4 superintendents are involved in those discussions. And the superintendents are meeting on a weekly basis. And so as these issues get identified, they go forward with Alberta Education, and it's a pretty high-level team. Like yesterday, I had a great discussion with a gentleman named Curtis Clark, who was quite interested in this diagram that I was holding as I was waiting to go into a meeting, and I was talking about it, and then I said, "Oh, and who are you?" He's the Deputy Minister of Education. So I think we were able to impact his thinking yesterday as we were waiting for our Board of Trustees meeting that they had yesterday to kind of deal with some of the emergent issues. So it's ongoing, but we have committed, use social media at FMPSD, at the public school, and our website. I know the Catholic system is posting stuff on their website as well, but social media has been our friend. Our social media was our friend on the day of evacuation. That's how I found out where to go, where to send the kids, and where to go from after that. And it continues to be our friend, so.
This is, most of us, we do have children, and we know that we cannot bring our children up to format as soon as we would like. So it's gonna be a long re-entry phase for lots of families, and I know that we are gonna need some support from the City of Edmonton, and I would encourage Jenny to share with us. Jenny is the Director of the Family and Community Services in the city, and she is here today to share with us all those services that are gonna be available here, not only during this month of June for school, but also all summer long.
I don't mind. I wish I had more information, because this morning there's a meeting to determine, we've closed the reception center at Northlands formally today, this afternoon at noon. And there still is the logistics and the support and products at Kingsway, at the Target Center at Kingsway. Both the universities have been designated as reception sites officially. Well, actually all 3, Concordia, U of A, and Grant MacEwan. And the discussion today was around the opening of an information center. So I'm waiting, if I get that any moment now, I'll let you know. But we certainly are looking at whether there is an information session or not, what the supports would look like. One question I actually had for you was whether there has been discussion with the Edmonton Public School Board or Edmonton Catholic School Board, because I know there are quite a few students registered here in Edmonton, and just thinking that there is at least a full month that students may be needing supports.
Yeah. Those discussions were probably the first discussions we had as to what do we do, and because we first had to know where the family settled. And of course, they've settled all across Canada. So Edmonton Public School was one of the first to reach out. Dara Robinson and Doug Nichols had conversations on the phone that next day. I know that Calgary Board of Education and Calgary Catholic have been fantastic in terms of welcoming their students. I was down there, and I'll be down there again on Monday, and hearing some absolutely wonderful stories of connecting kids, welcoming the children, our children, into their schools, and not only welcoming them, but ensuring those kids are feeling welcomed and are supported in whatever needs that they have. And it has been incredible. And a heartfelt gratitude from me as an educator to know that every school in Alberta knows what's happened and has welcomed our students, your children, and the families from our community. It's unprecedented in terms of the welcoming and the disbursement of the students. We even got a response from the BC Ministry of Education, just send the kids and we'll welcome them in BC too.
Thank you. The other thing I would just add is that we are trying to direct people through 211 for resource information about supports. So through our 211, that there should be information available to you about different resources. We have a variety of drop-in counseling supports throughout the city, and that information would be available through 211.
Thank you. We've been promoting that as well. We do get questions from parents, and what we've been doing in understanding the trauma-informed practices is finding the best tip sheets. And the best tip sheets that are short, 2 pages, not only what you can expect, but what can you do about it. And those have been taken up quite readily through social media, shared on Twitter. They're either shared or retweeted or posted on Facebook. So there is on Fort McMurray Public's website a collection of all the mental health resources and tips that we have shared for families, for parents, for staff. One of them I know that I shared was the media and the impact on the wildfires and media, the impact on children, which basically said, please turn off the television. Give the kids a break from those images, because the more you see those images, the more it's imprinted in the children's mind, and the longer it's going to take to undo those images. So that came from a tip sheet. So we did ask Alberta Health Services for the best tip sheets, because we have learned to be critical consumers. There's a lot of stuff out there. Not a lot of it's evidence-based, research-based, or has been vetted by the experts. And that's why we're taking good care to ensure that whatever trauma center experts we are relying on are truly the experts, in particular for a systems approach, not so much a therapy approach, but for a whole school district, and for a whole organization to be trauma sensitive. And that's why we've landed from a number of different sources on the Boston Trauma Center. So we've reached out to them, they've reached out to us, and I have about 10 books that I get to read in the very near future. So if anyone wants to read a book, just let me know.
Thank you very much, Brenda. So it's obvious from the questions and the conversation with the school-related issues that there's lots out there and lots of questions. But Brenda did note that check out the website, that things are being posted there, and that you can gather information, further information from there. You have a lunch break, you can have some chats with Brenda as well if you have some other questions. So we've got a couple of more information areas that we want to cover with you. The first one is around the Funders Circle, and we're going to have Kim Nordbye, and everybody knows Kim, I'm sure, but Kim's with Suncor Energy, and she's on the FuseSocial board, but she's actually here to talk about the Funders Circle. Thanks, Kim.
It's so good to see everyone today. It's certainly, I can't imagine what everyone's gone through, but it's been hard watching from the sidelines, I can tell you that. Brenda was mentioning a book, or books, many books, and I know you'll get many books, but this one was handed to me as I was leaving the office yesterday, and it came from a pastor in High River who used it as they recovered from the floods. And I don't have, it was just given to me and said, can you bring it back if possible? So I'm just going to read out the title. It might be a resource that you want to get. It's Healing Your Grief When Disaster Strikes, 100 Practical Ideas for Coping After Various Disasters. And it's by Alan D., and I'll spell the last name, Wolfelt. And I'll have it at my table if anyone wants to come have a look. And also, just before I get started, I was also emailed some resources from Pro Bono Law Alberta. They've set up a whole website with free legal resources, tip sheets, and I just printed off some samples for folks, and I'll put them on. There's one empty table back there. I'll just spread them out there. But you can go to their website, which is on these sheets, to get access to all the resources. So I'm just going to put this aside for a second. But as Lynn said, I'm Kim Nordbye with Suncor, the Suncor Energy Foundation, and I'm on the board for FuseSocial. And I lived in Fort McMurray for about 10 years, and I've been back in Calgary for just under 2. And we've just been trying as a corporate funder to learn from past experiences with disasters and support all of you in rebuilding in the community. Actually, while I was watching the fires from the sidelines, I was at the dentist one day with my son, and I happened to pick up a Reader's Digest because I was very tired of watching social media. It was very overwhelming. And I came across a quote, and I just want to read it because it became our mantra, if you'd like, at Suncor. It's posted everywhere in all our emergency centers and in all our cubicles. And I think it's very appropriate. So. The quote is from an article in Reader's Digest about how to support in time of crisis. What these experiences call for is a sort of passive activism. We have a certain tendency, especially in an achievement-oriented culture, to want to solve problems and repair brokenness. But what seems to be needed is the art of presence, performing tasks without trying to control or alter the elemental situation. Allow nature to take its course. Grant the sufferers the dignity of their own process. Sit there through moments of pain and uncomfortable darkness. Be practical, mundane, simple, and direct. And for us, that's just really resonated. And so we're trying to be helpful, to be there supportive, but to not control things and to not be overwhelming. So what Suncor has done is we were already part of several networks, the Oil Sands Community Alliance, the Calgary Community Investment Council, who also has an Edmonton Community Investment Council. And so when the fires hit, everyone started reaching out to each other, asking how as funders can we work together and how can we support the recovery and the rebuild. And so we quickly pulled together weekly calls with the Calgary Community Investment Council and the Edmonton Community Investment Council. And those are, I don't know if you even know, Shelley, how many, but there's probably 40, 50 companies that are part of these associations. And we just got on the phone and started talking and sharing information. So those weekly calls continue. And then we also had learned from the Calgary floods that it's important sometimes to come together in a special group that will help around the specific funds that have emerged. So the Red Cross funding, the United for Fort McMurray Fund, there's a Community Foundation Fund that's emerged that's raised about $1.5 million so far. There's a Rotary Fund that's in development. So as all of those funds are collecting much needed resources, in addition to all the corporate funding and the government funding, how are we going to work together as funders to ensure that we mobilize the right amount of money that you need, but also that we help make sure the money goes to where it's most needed. So we've put together a funder circle, and it by no means represents every funder, but it's has representation from some of the larger corporate funders in Wood Buffalo, the municipality, the Red Cross, the United Way, FuseSocial, and a few others, the Ministerial Association, who will help with individuals in need. And we're meeting once a week by phone. And again, it's mostly a sharing circle where we're sharing information, keeping each other informed on who's doing what. But we're also trying to talk through phases of support. So, you know, the immediate response for all of us was to give some funding to, most of us, to the Red Cross. That was an immediate need that we could meet. It was easy, it was quick, and it mobilized needed funds. The second phase of support is going to be around the reentry and the rebuild. There's different organizations that are going to need help there. So who are those organizations? And then the final will be that long-term rebuild. And you're going to need money in 3, 5, maybe even 10 years. So how do we ensure that the right amount of money is there for when the needs emerge? So that's the idea of the Funders Circle. It's really just a loose gathering of some of the major funders who are going to continue probably for the next 18 months, 2 years, to meet as needed and talk through and help to inform each other as funders so that we're not duplicating, that we're not stepping on each other's toes, but that we're getting the right support to where it's needed. And I think I should mention one other thing. One of the corporations, IBM, stepped forward to offer volunteer support, both in terms of their ability to put platforms together, but also their people, their employee program is to volunteer in times of need. And they're looking right now to put together a business-to-business platform, online platform, that would help connect needs to resources. So, if you're an organization, let's say in the community that needs 20 beds, and you post it on this website, then the funders or the people who can provide those resources would go on and in real time say, I can provide you those 20 beds and I'll deliver them at this time and go from there. So it'll be a business-to-business platform that'll help us over the next couple of years to connect those needs. Things like I need, as Diane has said before, Shannon, I need 20 strong men to shovel out, the backyard of Ash or whatever. They can post it, and then an organization can post their need, and then an organization can provide that need or fulfill that need. So that's hopefully going to come in the next couple of weeks. They're quickly designing. United Way and Fuse have been involved in helping to design that. And but there's lots and lots of companies out there. We get calls every day. Today it was Walmart calling saying, how can we help? So we're trying to direct them to the right resources and to help inform them on what is available out there for them to support. And that's kind of the role that Suncor's been playing, that OSCA's been playing, Imperial Shell, and I'm going to miss Syncrude, CNRL. We've all been working together to try and ensure that we get the right money into the community to rebuild. So, yeah. Any questions, I guess? Like Brandy, I'll say, it's okay. I'll disappear. Okay, thanks. That was great. So we're come to our final speaker, and it's Cathy Brothers with, she's the CEO of Capacity Canada. Many of you already know Cathy. She probably doesn't need much of an introduction. But Cathy's going to talk about the role of the board and the CEO during this next phase, and I think that's an important question that we heard that got elevated within the community. So Cathy, I'll turn it over to you.
I can still say good morning for 10 minutes, so good morning, everyone. And I'm just so impressed. I mean, I know we're all going to say the same things, but if we ever wanted a testimony to just the strength and power of the human spirit, you guys are it in spades. That when I first came as part of a Suncor Energy Foundation project in partnership with University of Waterloo, when I first came to Fort McMurray, and the questions were around how do you support and build a resilient and sustainable community? I think you've done a pretty good job of it. And that it's not even place-based. I mean, you're all out of your community, and your community is still alive and well in all the places that Brenda mentioned, not just across Canada, but around the world. So what we've heard from all the speakers this morning are some of the issues that you're going to be facing and are already facing, but will face big time as you re-enter and lead your community through the recovery phase and phases over the next while. One of the really, really important components of all of our work in the social profits is the role of the board. And you're at a moment in history where your boards can absolutely make a powerful difference in the long-term outcomes and the rebuilding and growing and the impact of all of the social profits. So for those of you that are, senior staff and executive directors, really, really, really important that at this stage you don't just jump so much into fixing it and moving ahead and dealing with all the immediate crises and risks and challenges and opportunities. on your own. Like, this is not a time for, you know, Lone Ranger or solo flights, you know. This is where the board ought to be playing a really, really fundamental role in deciding the direction that your agency is going to go in. On your tables, there's a document. I'm not going to go through it, or else we wouldn't even have dinner, let alone lunch. But it's a blueprint for what the board's role can be during this reentry and recovery phase, and it's set up in a way that we look at what some of the immediate role the board has, and then how that evolves throughout the recovery process. I think the document is one that is probably already on the FuseSocial website, and I would really suggest that all of you should have all of your board members read it. You don't need every board does not need to go through every one of these kind of processes, but you need to look at them and figure out which ones are relevant to your organization and your board and your role in the community. And what it will give you is some of the questions that the board ought to be asking. And there's so much, because the board has huge responsibilities now around risk oversight, but they also have huge responsibilities around what we like to call generative thinking, but visioning what your organization is going to look like 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. So you have, you know, you're at a time of incredible opportunity in determining the future of your organizations. And I just can't say enough about the importance of a mature partnership between the executive director and the board. How your agency will manage throughout this is going to be really determined by the tone at the top of the organization and what the culture is at the top of the organization, and the extent to which the CEO feels supported by the board, and the extent to which the board feels they can trust the CEO, and that, you know, the operations are in good hands. So even though, you know, there's bad analogy, but even though the fires are still burning around you and you want to jump into immediate sort of practical recovery mode, take time to put your feet up and have really mature discussions between the CEO or the executive director and the board about what is the culture at the top. Just don't assume that everybody sees it the same way. Like, don't assume that everybody understands what that culture is. Like, confirm what it is. Make sure that you all agree on it. And make sure that it's the kind of culture you want. Because if you hate each other's guts, you know, if you've got like a board from hell, if you've got a board chair that you wish was going back to Ontario with us, but we have our own share of those ones. But if you have a board chair that you have no confidence in, and a board that you can't even imagine how they all wound up around your table, or if you have, as a board, hired a CEO that you wonder, you know, what kind of med you're on when you did that because the person just isn't the right person. If you don't deal with that and figure out how you're going to trust each other, it's going to undermine all your recovery plans, because you won't know where your support is coming from, and you're going to get sort of sideswiped. Like, you'll be moving forward, and then either the CEO or the board will come up with something absolutely bizarre. And I say that in the extreme, but we've all been in those situations. So take the temperature, find out, talk. Like, again, you say that, like, what we're aiming towards here is a culture where we can recover and grow the agency. We want to be able to serve the community, to provide the services that are required, to support other organizations, to support people. But if we don't have the chemistry between us as a CEO and a board, let's talk about it and let's figure out what we want it to look like. And once you talk about it, it's like in all of our families, you know, the people are driving us crazy. Once we kind of figure out how to talk about it, it usually just gets better because we begin to understand each other better and maybe understand, you know, some of the perceptions. So talk about your expectations of each other. Ask questions about what needs to be done to get the desired tone. I can't stress enough the tone at the top, because if, for example, Bonna's board are all over her because they think she's making terrible decisions, you can absolutely guess how she's going to treat her staff. You know, if she doesn't have the support from the people she reports to, she can't, that old expression about, a bad baker bakes a bad cake. Like, it's, if you're not getting the support yourself, you can't support your staff. So you absolutely need to take the temperature, know what the tone is, know if it's what you need, if it's going to help you to be successful during the recovery, and if it's not, do something about it. So identify it, commit to the importance of trust, and ask what you're going to do to create that atmosphere so you can move forward together. If you have somebody, either your CEO or on the board, that says, forget spending time on this, we might all hate each other's guts, but we got real work to do, so none of this touchy-feely stuff, we're not going to spend time on trust, then I would suggest you just get rid of that person, because they will poison your efforts to work together and have a strong, recovery process. But don't get rid of them too fast. Talk first. So the whole idea is, if in terms of both as board members and as CEO, you need to take care of one another. The board needs to make sure that the executive director has the support they need during this time of stress and rebuilding. So yeah, lots of you have, like all of you that I have met that are in the ED role are pretty tough cookies, that you've weathered some tough things, you know your business well, you don't whine, you don't wear your hearts in your sleeve, but you're not superhumans, and your board needs to understand that you also need support, and they can't assume what that support might be. So talk about it, It's not enough to, in passing, say to the ED, you're doing a great job there, girl, keep it up. Like, it's more like, how are you doing? Are you getting the support that you need? What can we do to help you? So, the whole role around the board is always, you'll hear this, about asking questions. And then, for both, like throughout all of the presentations today, you see the importance of communication, but you can't always know in the agency who it is that you ought to be communicating to. So really spend time, starting before you even do your reentry, like drawing up listen lists of who your stakeholders are, who you need to talk to, how much information they need. It's not one person's responsibility to, carry out all aspects of the communication, but it is the board's responsibility to make sure there's a communication strategy, and that takes time and thought, and I would say it's if I put two things right up front with the, re-entry and the recovery for board and CEO roles, the two things are making sure the relationship is healthy and strong and trusting, and the other is that you have really clear communication plans, because everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Everything that you think you're going to do, somebody else is trying to do the same thing, and the potential for screwed up communications and the demoralization that comes with that is really high. So communicate. You have to have communication plans, and you have to have confidence that your relationships are strong enough to get you through the tough times. The other really important thing that is at a board level and boards need to be talking about during this rebuilding period is this whole issue that has come out in almost every one of the presentations today around collaboration. That is such, if there's a few words in the English language we should get rid of because none of us mean the same thing when we use them, and collaboration is probably one of them. But have that talk at the board level in terms of who is doing similar work to you and who should you be partnering with and what can that partnership look like, and ask questions about what role the board ought to be having with the boards of other agencies that have like issues and kind of services. So we want our CEOs and our senior staff and our program staff to all be collaborating at the ground level, but remember, tone at the top. If your board members never meet the board members of the similar agency, they're both then in the business of visioning the future in isolation of where you're going as a community as a whole. So spend some time at your board meetings right from the beginning and saying, as we do this rebuilding, who else ought we to be talking with? So that whole thing, again, I keep coming back to saying, you know, like for both the board and the CEO, like be really careful that you're not acting too independently as during the rebuilding times, either as an individual, because we like superstars in a way, but on the other hand, like rebuilding is a team sport. And, you know, really caution you, if you find that your organization or you as a leader are getting off on competing with and outdoing everybody else, you got to have a talk about that and say, you know, in the best interest of our community, how do we don't just say we collaborate, we partner. All of our strategic plans and mission statements say that. How we do it and when we do it and who we do it with. Like, you really need to flesh that out. But really, there's so much work out there. I mean, the needs in Fort McMurray are absolutely enormous. There's more than enough work for all. Everybody is going to have more than enough work. So you don't have to worry about competing. 30 of you can be in the same space and you still won't meet all the needs. But you'll meet them even worse if you don't work together. If 30 of you are providing similar programs and doing it in isolation of each other, you're going to confuse the hell out of the people that can use your services and supports. So it's the whole thing about recognizing that any one agency cannot and will not and is not all things to all people, and ask questions as a board in terms of what you want partnering and collaboration to look like. And that means you make a big commitment to the belief that a coordinated response is going to be best for both the community as a whole, for those that receive our services, and for those of us that deliver the services. So that's kind of the framework for this document, but this document will suggest some very specific things in terms of the areas of risk your board ought to be checking out right now. It will suggest that at this early stage of re-entry, your board should be meeting more frequently, and not to create more work for the CEOs, but to make sure they're asking the questions that the CEO knows that the board is behind them 100%. And part of, building up that shared expectations. So I guess I have gone longer than I'm supposed to. And I really recommend that you share this document among the people that are trying to build strong boards and a strong recovery plan. Thank you.
One other thing I wanted to tell you about is that, yes, indeed, there was a planning committee that was hard at work to make this day possible, and I'd be remiss if I didn't identify who those people are. You've seen a few of them already. You've heard from them as well. So Cheryl Cooper with the municipality, Matt Sawatsky with CCVO, Cathy Brothers, Diane Shannon with United Way, Lara Serrano with FuseSocial, Michael Grogan with CCVO, Nick Noik with Community Futures, Kim Nordbye with Suncor, and Luann Bussières with St. Agents. So thank you to all of you.